Welcome to Know Your Rules series. In this episode, we shall learn about protests in the world of four-wheeler motorsports.
What we will learn in this episode is 1. What is a protest? 2. Who can lodge or file a protest? 3. What are the characteristics of a protest? 4. What can one protest against, and in what time frame? 5. How to lodge a protest. 6. A look at the sample protest. 7. Hearing of protest. 8. The effects of filing a protest and the sanctity of its judgment. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, Paris, FIA, is the international federation for four-wheeler and above motorsports. The FIA has drawn up sporting regulations for various disciplines of motorsports like rally, race, hill climb, etc. The technical regulations for various types of vehicles that take part in these disciplines are defined under various articles in Appendix J. And the International Sporting Code, ISC, to ensure safe, fair or orderly conduct of these motorsporting events. With a view to ensure fairness and compliance to various regulations, to address rules violation, to protect the right of participants, to ensure safety standards, to uphold the integrity of motorsport events, to encourage transparency, and to provide a mechanism for dispute resolution. A process of protest is envisaged in the International Sporting Code. A protest may be defined as a formal complaint lodged by a competitor regarding a perceived breach of the rules, regulations, or fair play during a motorsport event.
Okay, who has the right to protest? According to the ISC, the right to protest lies only with a competitor. However, a driver can also lodge a protest if he is also the competitor in that event and holds a competitor's license as well. Who is a competitor? A competitor is a person or body accepted for any competition whatsoever, and necessarily holding a competitor's license issued by their parent ASN. The competition license may be broadly classified into two: 1. Driver, 2. Competitor. As the name suggests, a driver license is issued to the driver of the participating vehicle. It may be issued to a minor, depending on the eligibility criteria of the license or event concerned. Normally, the competitor's license is issued to an individual person, entity, a team who can legally enter into a contract. Because an entry into a motorsport event is a contract between a competitor and the organizer concerning the participation of the said competitor in a given competition. It can be signed by both parties or result from an exchange of correspondence. Hence, a driver of a legal age can hold both driver and competitor's license. The right to protest lies only with a competitor. Okay. Can more than one competitor join together and lodge a joint protest? The answer is no. The ISC clearly states that several competitors cannot lodge a joint protest. So it is one competitor, one protest. Now, can one competitor file a single protest against many competitors? The answer is again no. A competitor cannot file a single protest against many competitors. However, a competitor wishing to protest against more than one fellow competitor must lodge as many protests as there are competitors involved in the action concerned. So if a competitor wants to lodge a protest against 3 other competitors, then he or she has to file 3 separate protests. Okay, can a competitor file a single protest against many automobiles of the same competitor? Can he file a single protest addressing more than one subjects of protest like handicap, makeup of a heat, entry of a competitor, etc.? Again, no, he cannot.
To recap: 1. Only a competitor can protest. 2. No joint protest. 3. Separate protests against separate competitors. 4. Separate protests against separate automobile. 5. Separate protests on different subjects.
What can a competitor protest against and its time frames? Protest against entry of a driver or competitor and against length of the course. The protest must be lodged no later than 2 hours after the closing time for the pre-event scrutineering of the automobiles. Protest against any handicap should be lodged no later than 1 hour before the start of the competition or as specified in the applicable sporting regulations or supplementary regulations of the event concerned. If the protest is against make-up of a heat or final, then it should be lodged no later than 30 minutes after the publication of the make-up of a heat or final unless specified otherwise in the applicable sporting regulations or supplementary regulations. Now, coming to the important reasons for protests and the widely used ones. Any alleged error, irregularity, or breach of the regulations occurring during a competition. Protests referring to the alleged non-compliance of automobiles with the regulations. Provisional classification. These protests must be lodged no later than 30 minutes after the publication of the provisional classification, except in circumstances where the stewards consider that compliance with the 30-minute deadline would be impossible. In the event of technical issues related to the notice board. Article 11.9.4 of the Code. Or, unless specified otherwise, in the applicable sporting regulations or supplementary regulations. Please note that the maximum time limit is 30 minutes from the time of posting of provisional classification. If the stipulated 30 minutes have expired, you may still approach the stewards with the protest for them to consider the exceptions specified above. But there is no guarantee that your protest would be accepted. Please note that in the case of first two, one need not have to wait for the posting of provisional classification.
Before lodging a protest, please note that protests against decisions made by any judges of fact in the exercise of their duties will be inadmissible. If the protest is rejected or if it is withdrawn after being brought, no part of the deposit shall be returned. If it is proved that the author of the protest has acted in bad faith, the ASN or stewards may inflict upon them one of the penalties laid down in the Code. How to lodge a protest? 1. It must be in writing. 2. It must specify relevant regulations. 3. It must specify the concerns of protesting party. 4. The protest must specify against which competitor. 5. It must be addressed to chair of the panel of stewards. 6. They shall be delivered to the chair of the panel of the stewards. In the absence of the chair of the panel of the stewards, such protests shall be delivered to one of the other stewards, or in their absence, to the race director or assistant if such exists, or the clerk of the course, or assistant if such exists. 7. The protester must pay the relevant protest fees, or attach proof of payment of relevant protest fees. 8. As it is time-bound, you must get acknowledgement, in writing with date and time.
In the case of a protest, referring to the alleged non-compliance of an automobile with the regulations and requiring the dismantling and reassembly of clearly defined part or parts of an automobile, an additional deposit to cover the estimated costs involved in such checks may be specified by the stewards on a proposal from the technical delegate or the chief scrutineer. This additional deposit must be paid by the protester within 1 hour upon receipt of such notification of the stewards or, where appropriate, within such timeframe as agreed by them. Otherwise, the protest will be deemed inadmissible. The costs incurred in undertaking such checks shall be borne by the protester if the protest is rejected. If the costs incurred are less than the additional deposit paid, the surplus shall be refunded to the protester. Conversely, if the costs incurred are higher, the difference shall be borne by the protester. By the competitor against whom the protest is filed, if the protest is upheld. Under such circumstances, 1. The costs incurred shall be paid by the competitor, and 2. The additional deposit paid by the protester shall be refunded. If the protest is partially upheld, the cost shall be incurred proportionally by the parties. Such proportionality shall be determined by the stewards. The proportion allocated to the protesting party will be deducted from the additional deposit paid, and the balance will be refunded. The proportion allocated to the competitor against whom the protest is lodged shall be paid. Hearing of protest. Once your protest reaches the stewards, and the stewards admits it, they will send you, and other concerned parties, a steward summon, summoning you and relevant others, to appear before the stewards, to present the case. Please sign the same, with date and time, and attend the hearing. The hearing of the protester, and of all parties concerned by the protest, shall take place as soon as possible, after the protest has been lodged. You can bring witnesses. Produce any video or electronic evidence to support your claim, but it is left to the discretion of the stewards to rely on your video or electronic evidence. Please note that, in the absence of any concerned party or witnesses, the stewards may decide ex parte. Effects of a protest. A prize won by a competitor against whom a protest has been lodged must be withheld until a decision has been reached on the subject of the protest. Moreover, in the event of any protest being lodged whose outcome might modify the classification of the competition, the organizers shall only publish a provisional classification and shall withhold all prizes until a final decision concerning the protest, including appeals, has been reached. However, in the case of a protest affecting only part of the classification, such part as is not affected by the protest may be published definitively and the corresponding prizes distributed. Judgment. All parties concerned shall be bound by the decision reached subject to the conditions of appeal laid down in the Code.